This is the second in a series of videos on Assessment 101 at Johnson County Community College. Again, my name is Dr. Sherry Barrett, and we will be looking at ways in which we assess student learning here at the college. As I mentioned in the last video, we use the cycle of assessment as a framework for discussing assessment here at the college. The last video talked about forming your research question. What is it you want to know about your students? In this section of the videos, we will be looking at planning. It's very important to plan out a process by which you will do your assessment before you start into it. So let's start. Let's look at the plan. It's really important to develop an assessment plan to help you through the process and to make sure that you're gathering and have thought about all the pieces that goes into assessment. First of all, choose a class. As you look at the class that you want to assess, and you've already got your research question that we talked about before, choose a class objective and a matching student learning outcome. That's what a SLO is, a matching student learning outcome from the college that you want to assess as well. Look for assessment opportunities that are already in your curriculum. Don't necessarily put together new ones, but look for things that you're already doing in the class. Consider a timeline for collecting your data. Are you going to do this at midterm? At the end of your course? Some actually do both if you design a pre and post test kind of opportunity. It's important that you assess your students on their student learning outcomes at a time that's appropriate to the course. Obviously, you're not going to do a culminating kind of question at the beginning of a course because students won't know much about it and your results will not be meaningful. Collection of the data. How are you going to collect and record your results? What are the expected benchmarks that you have? You need to decide on these expectations before you collect the data. It's much too easy once the data is collected and you begin to look at the results to say, oh yes, that is exactly what I was expecting. It's fine. I don't need to make a change. If you decide on your expectations in advance, or at least some realm that you intend to aspire to for your students to operate at, then that will help you more when you get to the data itself. We have the following student learning outcomes here at the college. These are the overarching student learning outcomes that are for both general education and just as a outcome that we say all students here at the college are able to adhere to. The first is assess and evaluate information from credible sources. The next is collaborate respectfully with others. Communicate effectively through the clear and accurate use of language. Demonstrate an understanding of the broad diversity of the human experience and the individual's connection to society. Process numeric, symbolic, and graphic information. Read, analyze, and synthesize written and visual communication. Select and apply appropriate problem-solving techniques. And finally, use technology efficiently and responsibly. As you think about these overarching student learning outcomes, look also to your own course objective and program goals. The other piece of this, what I'll ask you to also look at, is if your program in your department has accreditation criteria or accrediting body that is specific to your discipline. If you are in, say, as an example, automotive and you have an outside accrediting body, look and see what the requirements of the accrediting body are too, so that you're capturing as many requirements as possible. Let's look for a little bit at some of the common tools of assessment. So on our previous video, you have developed your research question. Now we're actually going to decide, based on that research question, what's the best tool that we can use in terms of gathering the data that we need. So one of the ones that are used frequently is embedded assessment. This is a common assignment. It can be across multiple course sections. The question is embedded in a midterm or final over multiple semesters. I worked with a group this last semester that even embedded the questions in some homework assignments they were gathering. Usually we'll use a rubric to assess specific components. As an example, for a writing assignment, it might be papers or journaling or reflection papers, and the faculty have agreed on a rubric to assess how the students performed on that particular assignment. That's embedded questions or assignments. Another common tool is the pre and post test. We have quite a few departments here at the college that use pre and post test measures. It's useful to use because it shows you the gains the students made over a semester. The pre-test is administered very early in the semester, sometimes on the very first day. All or some of the questions can be geared to your assessment. The post-test is late in the semester. Sometimes it's the final exam, sometimes it's just a test given before the final exam. And then you can calculate what gain scores to show learning over the course of the semester for your students. Portfolios are an important way to assess student learning. I especially encourage those departments that have a capstone type of experience where they're asking students to bring components of what they've learned throughout their time here at the college. That's a good way to use a portfolio system for assessing student learning. They are demonstrating learning through the steps of collection, selection, reflection, and connecting all these pieces over time. It's most helpful if there's a learning goal that is best measured over time. If it's in the, say, the arts, and you want to measure how students began as a young artist and how they matured in their understanding and development of the art. It's great if it can reflect a culminating experience and reflect program goals at the same time. And portfolios are best assessed with a rubric, again, that reflects the requirements of the portfolio as defined by faculty. It's not enough just to have students collect material over time. You have to actually sit down as a faculty and discuss what is it that we expect to be reflected in that portfolio. Another common assessment is actually performance. This can be a lot of different things. It's giving a speech, it's performing a lab experiment, interacting with a patient in some of the healthcare classes, playing an instrument, teaching a class. All of these are performances. Again, it's best scored, those performances are scored, best scored using a rubric designed around the requirements of the assignment and the student learning outcome that's being assessed. It's easy to observe during the time of the performance. You can have the rubric right there in front of you and make your notations and mark it appropriately for the students as they actually give the performance. Another common tool is the capstone experience. We talked a little bit about this as we looked at the idea of a portfolio system. Again, this assessment tool can be varied. It can be a research paper as part of capstone, field research, lab work, practicums, group projects. Assessment can be handled as a separate component of the assignment or part of the overall scoring depending on the requirements of the capstone experience. Also, we need to acknowledge that many departments and many disciplines use commercial tests. Several disciplines here at the college have commercial tests that are required for their students because of what they're going to be doing when they graduate. These can be nationally standardized tests or professional tests required for licensing purposes. Overall scores over time can give some really good general information. More specifically, sub-scores over particular sections of the exams are even better for giving you more in-depth knowledge of what your students are successfully completing in your programs. They do require long-term tracking over time to determine if there are trends present in that data. And one of the downsides of commercial tests is they don't necessarily speak to program curriculum. So it's best if you have access to the test in advance so you can map out those subsections of the test that best match both the student learning outcomes and or the program goals. Another common tool of assessment is the rubric, which we have mentioned several times already. There are several parts to a rubric. We have wonderful examples here in the office, and if you'll give us a call, we're happy to share those examples with you. But some of the parts of a rubric are the task description, scales to define the student performance on the task, some commonly used descriptors such as exemplary, proficient, marginal, unacceptable. Sometimes it'll be advanced, intermediate, high, intermediate, or novice for early skills, distinguished, proficient, intermediate. You kind of get the idea. Dimensions on the rubric also lay out the parts of the task to be assessed, and then there's a description that defines the scale itself. Again, give our office a call and we're happy to provide examples of really good rubrics that we have here in the office. So the next step in the cycle is actually the last three. We're going to talk about how you collect and score your data, how do you analyze and discuss it, and finally, act and report on it.